I know I usually do a funny intro before my reviews, but I'm not doing that. Not for this one, nope. But what I will say is I tried singing a lot of Miss Franklin's songs after the film because they're stuck in my head, and I believe I'm going to get evicted, so if you don't see another review, that's why. What's going on, you guys? James here with another real review of a film I've been highly anticipating all year long. Respect, the Aretha Franklin biopic starring Jennifer Hudson, Forest Whitaker, and Marlon Wayans. It's directed by Liesl, and a huge thank you to MGM and United Artists Releasing for giving me the chance to watch this in theaters earlier this week. The movie takes us through Aretha Franklin's life all the way up to 1972 during her Amazing Grace live concert at a local church, and boy is this movie full of amazing singing moments and some things in between that, well, we'll talk about. But guys, before we get into my review, if it is your first time here at the channel, welcome to Real James, where we talk about movies like this all the time. So if you don't want to miss out, go ahead and hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, tap on that bell, and hit the thumbs up button if you're a big fan of Miss Franklin's music. And if you haven't already, get loud down below in the comments and let me know what you thought of Respect when you see it, or if you are a huge Aretha Franklin fan, what is your favorite song in her catalog? So guys, like I said, this movie highlights certain areas of Aretha Franklin's life all the way up to 1972, so it does leave off a big chunk of her career and life. But hey, this is the positive section, so we're going to get into what works with Respect, and at the top of the list is the leading lady herself, Jennifer Hudson, an Academy Award winning actress who honestly does a pretty good job at embodying Aretha Franklin. Now, I've been a Jennifer Hudson fan for quite some time. I think she is incredible, but man, does she elevate the singing moments in this movie. I knew going into this she was going to blow me away, but man, I wasn't prepared for what she was able to belt out in this film. It's incredible just to see the way she doesn't sing like Jennifer Hudson, but rather she almost sings like Aretha in a way. She is embodying, again, Miss Franklin in her vocals. So I love the fact that Jennifer Hudson kind of switches up a little bit just to go ahead and really dive into the role. And I do love that Jennifer Hudson's acting in between these singing moments got better as the film went on. And again, when you go back and watch interviews or certain documentaries with Aretha Franklin, you're going to notice that Jennifer Hudson does nail the mannerisms just a little bit. And I'm very happy because this is only going to help her Oscar campaign. Although what I will say is in the beginning, I felt that Jennifer Hudson was a little bit too reserved, but not just due to Aretha having yet to reach stardom. I think it's just Jennifer Hudson not being comfortable in the role until that midway point. When we get to that second act, that is when I think Jennifer Hudson hits her stride. And then there's this scene in the final chunk of the film where she is battling alcoholism because, again, Aretha Franklin had dealt with that in the past. I just think Jennifer Hudson does an excellent job in that moment. So that for me is the peak of her acting ability in this movie. Now, what I will say, guys, is I love Aretha Franklin, but I won't pretend to be her biggest fan. So that being said, this biopic did educate me on certain areas of her life that I was otherwise unaware of before sitting down in my seat. And I'm sure a lot of fans will ask, does this actually address her childhood trauma and struggles with alcoholism? Well, we'll talk about more of that in a little bit. But I do have to give this film credit again where credit is due because it educated me and a fellow critic on certain areas of Miss Franklin's life that, again, I was otherwise unaware of. And for as long as this movie is 2 hours and 32 minutes, guys, I surprisingly didn't feel the length. That's not to say I wasn't thinking, okay, where are we at right now in the movie? But what I will say is that I wasn't necessarily struggling with the runtime, but that's probably because, one, I didn't know what was coming next in many scenes because, again, I didn't know too much about her life. And two, I just wanted to see more of Jennifer Hudson singing. I think that was the biggest draw for me, so that helped carry the film in those moments where maybe it hit a little bit of a lull. But outside of Jennifer Hudson, guys, we do have to talk about the supporting cast because it's not terrible. The legendary Forest Whitaker, one of my favorite actors of all time, is playing Aretha Franklin's father here, Minister C.L. Franklin. Whenever he's alongside Jennifer Hudson, I do feel like both of them play off one another very well. There's even one moment in here where I believe both of them are at their peak in terms of their acting ability together, where they're at a bar. It's very intense, and guys, let me tell you, Forest Whitaker and Jennifer Hudson, I don't know, but they bring the best out of each other in this movie. Now, when it comes to the treatment of her father in this film and whether they really dive into his past, again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And someone I was surprised to actually see in the cast was one actor that, again, I will say needs to be cast more in films, Titus Burgess. I just don't know how Titus Burgess has not been cast in more movies. I loved him in Dolomite Is My Name, and here he plays Reverend James Cleveland, and it's such a beautiful moment that both he and Jennifer Hudson share in this film at the end, right before they go ahead and record that live concert at church for the Amazing Grace concert. And let me tell y'all, I was blown away by how Titus Burgess brought a lot out of those scenes. Like, he, for me, was one of those scene stealers, and it was just engraved in my memory. I got out of the theater and all I could say was, but Titus Burgess, did y'all see Titus Burgess? I also really enjoyed Mark Maron as Jerry Wexler, the record label executive who worked with Miss Franklin for many years. His bravado is a really good contrast to Jennifer Hudson's portrayal of Aretha Franklin because he's eccentric. She is a little bit more reserved, but very calculated, and she gets her way. But I love Mark Maron and what he did here. I almost feel like I need to go revisit his filmography because he does something here that is really, really special, and what he does is add another layer to this film. So I think his performance was really noteworthy. And before we get into the negatives, guys, I do love how the song making moments were constructed and filmed. There was this vintage appeal that director Liesl brought, and I don't think that she honestly used film. She probably filmed all of this in digital, but I do love seeing the film grain effect on screen, the little line breaks, and I do like that sometimes it was shot in black and white. It just kind of added to the time period that this movie was set in. And honestly, I'm just a sucker for seeing legendary songs being made in studio by legendary artists. So the movie did this very well to recreate everything and keep my eyes glued to the screen. Now, alright guys, you got Jennifer Hudson belting out some amazing tunes, and I think that the supporting cast isn't terrible here, but what I will say is, boy, there's something here that held back respect from being great, and it starts with the formulaic approach. This is a very by-the-numbers biopic, and unfortunately it does not allow for the weight of Aretha Franklin's life to be fully realized. Now, what I will say is Aretha Franklin's life is very extensive, and it's tough to fit that in a film, and I don't think this format actually suits her very well. I believe there is a miniseries with Cynthia Erivo that's out there that dives into her life a little bit more, but in a film in this little shell, I just don't think that the full weight of her life and her impact was felt. And unfortunately, that formulaic approach also brings about a surface level depiction of key moments in her life. And I know we said we would talk about it later, but we're going to talk about it right now, guys. Aretha Franklin experienced a lot of childhood trauma and gave birth at a very young age because, and yes, this is a trigger warning, guys, because she was raped. And it was terrible to see it. They alluded to it, they very briefly touched on it, and there was a very quick flashback moment where they show Aretha Franklin's child actor in this movie with a pregnant belly, and it did break my heart. Our theater gasped, and it's one thing again that I didn't know if they were really going to dive into, but for me, they went by so quickly. They glossed over it, and I didn't want them to focus on it, sure, but I just don't feel like the impact was felt because they barely mentioned it even as Aretha Franklin was an adult. And I also think that respect gives Miss Franklin's father a pass by the end for his actions and his treatment of their family. But from what I read, Aretha Franklin was very heavily involved in this film, so of course I would imagine she's not going to paint her father in a bad light. However, he got a hall pass for, I mean, all things considered. They alluded to certain things in this movie that he did wrong, but they didn't really capitalize on it, and to me, they never really fully executed exactly what they could have done in these moments, which is provide more layers to Aretha Franklin's life. Instead, they just kind of glossed over it. And when it comes to the overall direction by Liesl, I felt that there was this uneven pacing to the film. We almost speed walk through her rise to stardom, so by the time we get to the end of the film in 1972, I actually didn't necessarily feel like we were on her journey with her as she was rising up to this stardom level. There's a lot of expositional dialogue here that explains to us through conversation, this is what it took to get here. But why couldn't we see that on screen? And even outside of her rise to stardom, there are just some scenes that happen without much context, like Mary J. Blige's character flipping over a table in a bar, so it feels really jarring to audiences who might not know the ins and outs of Aretha Franklin's life. But one area that this movie focuses on a whole lot is with Aretha Franklin's husband, Ted White, who is played by Marlon Wayans. This is an important chapter in her life, of course, as she learned a lot about her own self-worth and standing up to someone who abused her. So I understand the reasoning and the direction behind giving this important moment of her life the most screen time, but there is an issue with this area of her life as well. And that is Marlon Wayans' portrayal as Ted White, because while I love Marlon Wayans, I feel like he was very, very badly miscast here. There's this voice or accent that he uses that really takes me out of every conversation, and it breaks a lot of the immersion for me. But also, I don't think Marlon Wayans is necessarily the actor that was the best fit for this role. Not saying he's a bad actor, I just don't think that he handled whatever the script was feeding him very well. And whenever both Marlon Wayans and Jennifer Hudson are on screen together, guys, I just can't tell you that they have that chemistry for me. I really do wish that they kind of rethought who would be cast as Ted White here, because, guys, there are plenty of moments that are make or break based on the chemistry between Jennifer Hudson and the actor who plays Ted White. And for me, Marlon Wayans, Jennifer Hudson, they just didn't have that it factor enough to carry the movie when it needed it most. So overall, you guys, Respect isn't a terrible biopic, but it certainly doesn't feel like it paid enough respect to Aretha Franklin. The film really struggles to break out of this by-the-numbers approach, and for a movie about Miss Franklin's life, you would think they would add a different spin to this, that it wouldn't just be this formulaic vision for the film. But unfortunately, outside of a strong performance by Jennifer Hudson, this movie doesn't necessarily make me feel the gravitas of Aretha Franklin's life. And it's a shame to say that, because I know how important she was not only to music, but to the civil rights movement, to social justice, and to fighting for equality and equity. But guys, I just don't think the movie really does a good job at really honing in on that. And again, I think it comes back to, you can't fit Aretha Franklin's life in a movie. I'm sorry, even in a 2.5-hour movie. So I do think that this film unfortunately doesn't pay the most respect to Aretha Franklin's life, but again, it features some strong performances here, some amazing singing moments, and for fans of her music, seeing them make and develop the songs is a treat in and of itself. So guys, there you have it. That's my real review of Respect. Again, a movie that isn't bad, but I will say that it is unfortunately not as strong as it could have been. But hey, I need to know exactly what you thought of Respect down below in the comments, so go ahead and get loud and let me know, was this movie something that you loved? Did you enjoy it a lot, or were you a little, well, on the downside of things? And if you haven't already, hit the big red button below, subscribe to the channel, and tap on that bell, y'all, so you won't miss out on another review just like this. Alrighty, y'all, again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you at the next screening. And I promise, no more singing, because I can't do it. I'm not a good singer, okay? I can review movies, I just can't sing.